The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods." If you live in or around DeSoto County, you know exactly what this man is thinking about. For our land has produced plentifully. God has blessed us richly. We live in a land where, if we go to the store, we will often and most always see food on the shelves of some kind. Sometimes they are a little bare, but most of the time they are full. We live in a land where people want to live, where people want to move. Money.com or one of those things rated it one of the top 50 places in the U.S. to live, Olive Branch, Mississippi. And why? Because this is a place where people have things. They have money in their bank accounts. They have food on the shelves. And they have help when they need it. And most of all, we have here, if you drive around, massive, massive warehouses for FedEx and for Amazon and for all those types of places. Massive warehouses filled to the brim with the goods of the world. And perhaps it is true that that will not last forever. Perhaps it is true that the supply chain will collapse at some point, but we'll save that discussion for when we talk about famine in the book of Joel the next 3 Wednesdays, so show up for that. But for now, let's think about this. We have warehouses and we have plenty. We have plenty of things, so many things, that if you drive up Goodman Road, or if you go down Goodman Road and then you drive up Hacks Cross, or you drive up Polk Lane down by where I live, you will see new warehouses being built to store even more things, so that maybe one day we can even have 1-day shipping instead of 2-day shipping. Maybe instead of high-speed internet, we can have super gigafast fiber, whatever internet, something even newer than is newest now. And maybe that will be amazing. You can think about all of the things that could be as you get more and more stuff, as the land produces more and more bounty, and maybe you think this is great. This is all that we could ever need, and we have it right here. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God for giving me all of this grain, all of these things, all of this food to eat, all of these things to have for my pleasure. And especially thanks be to God now, for it is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday. Thanksgiving, the time precisely to, as the man says in the gospel, relax. Put the footrest up on the lazy boy, turn on the football, eat, drink, break out the pumpkin pie, and be merry. What a great day, and what a great time to live. The problem is, however, that is exactly what the rich man thought when Jesus came to him that night and called him a fool. And that's why we read this gospel tonight. The gospel for a harvest observance is what it's called, if you look it up in the lectionary. And the readings tonight, I think, serve, when we're thinking about what we harvest from the land, because that's what Thanksgiving was about, what was harvested from the land. The readings tonight serve as a clarification or a narrowing of what it means to be truly thankful. Truly thankful for the material blessings that God has provided for us. Truly thankful for the material goods and blessings, or as we like to say in Lutheran terms, the first article gifts that God has given us. First article referring to the article of God's creation. The things that he has given us in creation for our good. And to look at what it means to truly be thankful for those things. For to truly be thankful for those things is not simply to look at all of them and to consider all of them and to consider how many of them there are and how great they are. For if that was all it was about, then we could actually simply get rid of the Thanksgiving holiday. We could maybe keep the meal because everyone likes to eat, drink, and be merry. And we could definitely keep the football. And most importantly, we could keep Black Friday. Because if it's all about simply seeing how much you have and how great it is, then we should keep the thing where we can get more and more things for better and better deals. That would be the ideal Thanksgiving if that's all being thankful was for. But that's not what true thankfulness is for that can still result in foolishness, like it did for the man. And so what is the point of all this? What is true thankfulness shown in? And I think when you read these readings, you realize that true thankfulness is ultimately shown in true stewardship. And let me clear that up a little bit more and use not such a theological word. To be truly thankful means that you share. To be truly thankful for the gifts that God gives you, for the first article gifts that he gives you in this creation, means that you go forth and you share those gifts that you have been given, first to God and then to your neighbor. Because if we don't go forward and we share those things, if we don't steward those things out to God and to our neighbors, to those whom God has given us to care for, then it will ultimately result in covetousness. If gaining material goods and gaining first article gifts is just for yourself, you turn into the rich man. The rich man who is a fool, who simply wants more and more and more. And when he has so much that he can't even fit it all in the house that he has and in the barns that he has, that he actually just goes forth and he builds bigger barns, bigger warehouses. But that results in covetousness. And Christ said to them, "Take care, be on guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." If all of life is only about the abundance of stuff, then you will only covet stuff. And that is all you will have. But to remember this, to remember that to be truly thankful requires sharing, all you have to do, and maybe this is a little cliche, is remember the first Thanksgiving. The whole point of the first Thanksgiving was that the pilgrims survived the winter. And why? First of all, because of God's grace, because they prayed, and second of all, by the Indians helping them. And so to show their thankfulness, what do they do with the harvest, the bountiful harvest that they receive for surviving the winter? When they are first able to, they share. They steward out the gifts that they were given, first to God and offering him prayer and praise and thanksgiving, and second to the Indians who had helped them by sharing their harvest with them. True thankfulness is a matter of sowing and reaping. The rich man's problem was that he was sowing first and only for himself. When he should have been laying up treasures in heaven, when he should have been offering sacrifice to God and worshiping God and returning to God all thankfulness with all eagerness, he was putting things up in his barn. And when he should have been helping and sharing the things he was putting up in his barn with the poor and with the needy and maybe with his church and probably with his family whom God had given him to care for, he was busy not there at the dinner table with them. He was busy building bigger barns to store stuff for himself. And so God comes to him in the night and he asks him the toughest question. What's the point? When you die, which will be tonight, by the way, when you die, whose will these things be? What's the point of all of the stuff? Yeah, it could go to the children, and maybe the children could profit from it for a little bit. But eventually that grain is going to rot away. Eventually those storehouses are going to be blown down by a storm, or moth and rust is going to get them, just like moth and rust gets everything else. If you drive up and down Coke Lane and Hacks Cross 100 years from now, I bet you at least one of those warehouses is not going to be there anymore. What's the point of all of the stuff? Your children are also going to die one day, and they also will not be able to take it with them when they die. So what's the point? Treasure towards only oneself. It is not being rich toward God. And so this Thanksgiving, I want you to ask yourselves, how do I grow in richness toward God? And that's the stewardship we're talking about. Stewardship always requires investment. Growing in riches always requires investment. And so what do we invest in? And I'm not just talking about investing in one's warehouses or in Black Friday deals, but investing in thanksgiving. Investing in thanksgiving toward God and toward your neighbor. And that means sharing with them, being generous to them. Remember the command for the first fruit offerings in Deuteronomy, and it's all based on what God has done for them. Remember, Moses says, remember what it was like. Remember what it was like to be in slavery to Egypt. Remember what it was like to be in slavery to sin. Remember how bad things were and how bad things could be. Remember that you could be oppressed and persecuted and you could be tortured by those who hate the gospel, but God has granted you his divine protection. And remember that you were and you have been through so much pain and suffering in your life. And yet God has brought you here. He has brought you to the promised land of his salvation. He has brought you to a land flowing with many good things, to a land flowing with milk and honey. He has given you what you need, so much that you need, more than you need. He has given you so many things. And so all he asks is that you take a little bit of that, just the first fruits of that, just the first 10% or so of that, of the bounty that the Lord provides, and give it back to him. Give it back to him and offer it back to him to show him that you remember. To show him that you know who is the one who causes the bounty. That you know who is the one who causes the grain to sprout into what ends up on the shelves in the warehouses. To show him that you remember who has brought you from slavery to sin into the promised land of his salvation. And then also to your neighbor. For while you are there offering your offering to the Lord and worshiping and bowing before the Lord your God, while you are here tonight doing exactly those things, you also sacrifice and you also share with your neighbor. That's why we're going to exchange bread tonight, to show that we care for one another, just like the Pilgrims and the Indians did so many years ago. That we take out of our time to be here on a random Wednesday night. We take out of our time and our treasures and our talents and our accounts and our warehouses, and we bring those things together here tonight to share with each other. For while you cannot invest in purely material goods and take them to heaven with you when you die, when your soul is required of you, you can invest in other people. You can encourage one another in the gospel. You can encourage one another in the faith, love, and hope that we have in Jesus Christ, our Savior. And that you can take to heaven. For as we grow together in the faith, we grow together, growing more and more like the one who we will be like when he comes again to take us home. And so we come together here, sowing material bread, but reaping a bountiful spiritual harvest. And that is a beautiful image. It's a beautiful image because it's exactly what Christ does for us in his Lord's Supper, which we will also partake of tonight. His Lord's Supper, which is often called the Eucharist in Greek, which literally means thanksgiving. Because on the night when he was betrayed, Jesus took bread and he gave thanks to his Father in heaven. And so this Thanksgiving meal, as we partake in both spiritual bread and as we partake also in material bread, my prayer for you is this: that on this Thanksgiving, your Thanksgiving be clarified. That you see Thanksgiving not simply considering the amount or the size of all the treasures and all the warehouses that you have, things stored up in, but that you have true thanksgiving. True thanksgiving that results in true stewardship, and sharing with and giving to God and one another out of the bounty that the Lord has given to you, that you may sow bountifully and thus reap bountifully. And then that this giving to one another, that the thanksgiving may multiply in you. For Paul talks about this as kind of a positive feedback loop. That as you give thanks, you will be generous, you will share. And as you are generous and as you share, it will cause you to give more and more thanks for what you have and for what you are sharing. He says it this way: you will be enriched in every way for all your generosity, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. The generosity produces thanksgiving, and the thanksgiving produces generosity. And so as you are thankful tonight, and as you are generous tonight and tomorrow and the rest of your whole Christian life, may your generosity and your thankfulness produce, as Paul says, overflowing thanksgivings to God, that we may have thanksgivings upon thanksgivings upon thanksgivings, so that we may share and share and share God's goodness and God's blessings and God's love with one another. God grant this to us all. Amen.